everybody ready to get started? So welcome to the fifth of six comprehensive tourism plan meetings, and thank you very much to the mayor for hosting us here at Santigua Town Hall. There's coffee and cookies, and there's some Cokes and water in the refrigerator, Mandy said, so please help yourself, and of course the restroom's right there, and I'm glad y'all were all talking while I was in there. In our visitor center, we have a restroom, it's like, okay, it's really quiet in here. But anyway, thank you for coming, and I'll turn it over to Chris. We're going to talk about kind of our strategies and objectives and things moving forward.
And also, real quick, I know some people have already expressed me, if you have to get up and leave, it's fine. Feel free, because I know there might be some people coming a little later, and I know some of you have got to get out of here to some other things, so feel free to come and go as you need to.
Yeah, and absolutely, feel free to do whatever you need to. Don't let the fact that the restroom is behind me intimidate you from getting up and actually using the restroom either. My name is Chris Kavanaugh, and I'm glad to be here today. It is St. Patrick's Day, and for a guy named Kavanaugh, it's kind of a big deal. Now, most people would presume that I'd either be drinking green beer or be passed out by now at 5 o'clock with a name like Kavanaugh on St. Patrick's Day. I'm not. I haven't had anything to drink yet today. I did say yet, so I'm delighted to be here. Thanks for your time and attention. I want to make this an ongoing dialogue because most of our meetings thus far have been just that. And I really pride myself on trying to listen, and that's what I've tried to do over the last 4 meetings. While I've got a PowerPoint presentation to show you today, hopefully you will stop me and speak up or express your opinions and feedback as we go through this today, so don't hesitate to do so. I want to start by going through what I think are the plan objectives for this tourism plan that GRADE is sponsoring. And I bring these to your attention because I don't want somebody as we go through this to say, gosh, you know, I thought one of our core objectives, our core strategies needs to be to get more people to visit Graham County. Absolutely is, okay? That's got to be one of the things that we achieve from this plan. So we want to increase overnight day trip visitation to Graham County. We want to generate more tourism-related revenue. We want to increase tourism-related employment, provide more small business opportunities, and increase the local tax base. Those are, I feel, are 5 primary objectives that should result from this study. We have gone through a process where we've had a fair amount of input, and this input has come from a stakeholder survey, online survey that we did, that we got a very good response from. We've done 4 public workshops up to this point where we had a great deal of feedback. I've also tried to include some available data where I can get available data that's relevant to this process and the tourism in Graham County, and then some external trends, some things that I've identified that I think are very relevant to this plan as we begin building it to take advantage of the marketplace opportunities. What I'm going to focus on a lot today is strategic challenges and opportunities. And I've heard a lot of different things over the last few months. Gotten a lot of feedback, great feedback. But we need some focus. It's time to begin to focus and to narrow down the process, narrow down the input into some things that are usable strategies and tactics going forward. So we're in a process of identifying challenges and opportunities. We're going to take those and turn them into plan objectives and then turn them into strategies. And just to elaborate a little bit more on that, challenges and opportunities you'll see reflect not only external challenges and opportunities, but also internal. What are some barriers to success that are imposed on us by the external environment or by ourselves? Our goals and objectives need to be measurable and action-oriented. And then finally, we're going to turn those into specific action items. We'll really focus a lot on the action items in our final public workshop later on. Now, I want to be very clear about something here. We've got, again, as I said, we've got a tremendous amount of feedback on this process. And I think that all of the feedback that we get sort of falls into three buckets. There are things that we can't easily control. As I told someone earlier, I would love to be able to save the world with this plan. I would love to be able to correct everything that's wrong with Graham County, with Western North Carolina, with all of North Carolina with this plan. But we're not going to do that. Okay, so we have to have an understanding that there are things that we can't easily control that influence our ability to grow tourism here. There are things that we can influence, and some examples of that. When I say things that we as tourism stakeholders, as interested participants in this process, we can influence tourism product development. We can influence local economic development that may influence tourism. We can certainly influence the visitor experience. And then finally, there are those things that we can definitely control. And some examples: tourism policy making, destination marketing, and funding for tourism initiatives. The plan, and a lot of today's this presentation is going to focus on these two parts right here. I'll talk about some of these external environmental factors, but we need to think about what it is that we can control and influence. So this divides up into two buckets. There are strategic challenges and strategic opportunities. And what I'm looking for is the marriage of the two. How can we take advantage of the two? How can we address our challenges and take advantage of some strategic opportunities? And I've identified, based on everyone's feedback, 5 challenges and 5 opportunities. I think one of the big ones is that there's a lack of opportunities for visitor spending in the area. And this has a almost catalyst effect upon much of the local economy. It certainly inhibits tax revenue, it inhibits job development, it inhibits the ability to grow the tax base in the area. And so there are definitely lack of opportunities for visitor spending. Now, I could argue, or you could argue, that if we just simply get more visitors here, that would help that considerably, and it would. But how can we get even a larger share of wallet from the people who do visit here? And I want to present some data to you that helps illustrate this point. Let me walk through this. Every year, the state of North Carolina Travel and Tourism Division issues a study called the Economic Impact of Travel on North Carolina Counties. It comes from the Department of Commerce and the United States U.S. Travel Association, and they partner on this study. And since 1991, they have attempted to gauge what the impact is of tourism in a number of different ways in each county in North Carolina. And this study is based on a combination of available data, such as tax data and so forth. It's also based on, currently based on a consumer panel of about 1 million travelers. Then they extrapolate this to every county in North Carolina. And Tabitha can tell you that every year, usually sometime in the middle of the summer, the state issues the numbers for the previous year for each county. And so you can look and see what your individual county, how it compares to other counties in the state. Now, we were talking earlier, and these numbers are always subject to a great deal of debate. There's a lot of questioning about the methodology. There's questioning about how accurate the numbers are. But they use the same methodology for every county in the state. So the primary benefit is to look and see how your county compares to other counties in the state. The numbers may be off. They may not be exactly right for every county, but if they're off for every one of the 100 counties in the state of North Carolina. So in terms of visitor expenditures, the most recent data available is for 2013. In terms of visitor expenditures, the state estimates that there was $25 million in direct visitor expenditures in Graham County in 2013. That ranks Graham at 79th out of 100 counties. And among the 23 mountain counties, which I've identified, that ranks Graham 19th out of those 23 counties. Now, we know that this is a relatively small county, has obviously tremendous amounts of undeveloped land. mostly due to the fact that so much of it's controlled by federal and state government. And we'll talk about that later. So we look at some of these other metrics to begin to understand direct impact of tourism. And I think these are probably the most significant numbers in terms of how you compare to other North Carolina mountain counties. It is, there are a lot of counties in the state of North Carolina that have very little tourism infrastructure, particularly in the eastern part of the state, outside of the coastal areas. So this is probably more of a relevant. And you see that in terms of visitor expenditures, there are 4 counties that rank lower in the western part of the state: Polk, Allegheny, Mitchell, and Clay counties. And again, not too surprising, they are relatively sparsely populated, relatively smaller counties in the western part of the state. Now, the state's been doing this since 1991. And so we can look at the change from 1991 to 2013. And I've taken the other westernmost counties in western North Carolina to compare Graham County to. So Graham, from 1991 to 2013, in terms of visitor spending, has had a 134% increase in visitor spending. Now, yeah, okay, that compares obviously not very well to Swain and Jackson counties, but there's one big reason, and it's called Harrah's, that influences these numbers for Swain and Jackson County, okay? These are probably more of a relevant comparison here. And there's been talk about, well, can we subtract the impact of the 1,000 rooms at Harrah's out of that? And Dr. Steve Morse of Western Carolina is working on that. He owes me a favor, so I'm going to ask him about getting those numbers for me. He owes me 2 favors, so it'll probably be worth both of those. But if we look at the percent change, how does that rank against, how does that compare to other counties in the state? So Graham's rate of growth was 70th during that time period from 91 to 2013, and out of all 100 counties in the state, and was 20th out of 23 counties in the western part of the state. That's a big period of time, though. That covers a lot of ground. I mean, 1991 was pre-internet, 1991 was before we saw widespread, as much widespread travel. It was obviously pre-9/11. That was in the middle of a recession, and we've obviously seen a great deal of changes since 91. So what if we look at just the period of 2000, just this century, 2000 to 2013? And what's concerning here, and what I think is a real call to action for everyone in the county, is that our rank in terms of rate of growth is now 95th out of 100 counties in terms of growth of personal spending of visitors. And we're now 21st in terms of growth out of 23 mountain counties. Only Mitchell County and Caldwell are lower. So I think we've got a real opportunity. Now, 28% is not bad, okay? There's been growth in the state of North Carolina in travel tourism. But until you start looking at how you compare to other counties in the state, we're in a real boom period for travel and tourism historically, okay? This century, even despite the downturn attributable to the recession that we had right after 9/11 and after the crash in 2008, tourism is going great guns in most of the state of North Carolina, and we're losing ground. Our rate of growth now is 95th out of 100 counties just since 2000. So while there has been growth, it's been relatively slow. Roger?
If you factored in inflation, would we have negative jobs? I think you would.
Yeah, I think you would, actually.
Well, then, as you're doing your study, I think you really need to say that.
I think it's a fair point. I think it's a very fair point. So obviously, now, one other thing too, a real cautionary note here. This is not a hunt for the guilty, okay? Our plan is meant to try and address some of these challenges. It's not a hunt for the guilty. It's not necessarily to point fingers at anyone or anything. But we do obviously have an opportunity, and as I said, I think this is a real call to action when we look and see. Again, there's been growth, but obviously, to your point, not sufficient either relative to inflation or relative to other counties in North Carolina.
Could I ask one other question?
Yeah.
Something just doesn't feel right to me when I look at Cherokee County, which I don't think had the casino in 2000, and now it does.
No, it's a reservation, that's Cherokee County.
Where is the,
Murphy and Andrews is
It's in
Cherokee
Swain
County.
and Jackson.
Yeah, Swain, it goes, the impact is felt in both
so
Swain and
the
Jackson.
casino is in Swain County?
Yes.
Mhm.
And Jackson.
And Jackson,
And since it's on a reservation, it wouldn't go into state numbers
I
anyway.
didn't know that.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it
That makes
influences
sense.
both, and they don't track unfortunately, the state doesn't track the Qualla boundaries separate, as a separate entity. They look at it only in terms of division. And I think that what the county line runs basically through both, through the casino, so. So yeah, the impact is for both Swain and Jackson. That's why they rank number 1 and number 2.
Yeah.
And there's certainly, while obviously Harrah's, the casino and the hotel make up the vast majority of that, there's also
No,
been some.
they don't, because it's a federal reservation, that's not affecting those numbers. That's what's the synergy effect. is.
Well, that's what I was getting ready to say, actually. It's just, obviously, the casino is the driver of a lot of that
Yes.
activity. It's obviously has a tremendous spillover, and a lot of those hotels that have been either built or renovated wouldn't be there if it wasn't for the casino. So no, you're absolutely right.
Well, and to point out too, Swain has like a train and some other
Yeah,
assets.
and the train moved from Jackson to Swain during that period.
That's true, too.
And also NOC and all the other rafting companies that are down the gorge that we send people to them all the time.
All right, so just to do a little deeper dive on some of these, I think that the biggest opportunities in terms of, biggest challenges in terms of opportunities are in retail, food and beverage, and then commercial opportunities that leverage the outdoor assets. And we've heard a lot of feedback about that, about how can we grow, if we have these tremendous outdoor assets, how can we grow the commercial opportunities and make that more robust for the county in terms of opportunities. We've heard a lot of feedback from stakeholders about the lack of retail and lack of food and beverage opportunities in the county. And ultimately, a lot of feedback about why it's a challenging environment for small businesses. We've heard a lot of feedback about a lot of different reasons why it's a challenging environment for small businesses. I think the second biggest strategic challenge facing the county is that there's not a well-defined market image. And just to do a deeper dive on that, there's a lot of reasons for that. One of the first things we talked about in our public workshops was, I got some feedback from you about the different visitor types. And we identified about 10 different visitor types that are in Graham County. Now that's pretty remarkable for a relatively lightly populated county that is mostly outdoor focused, does not have urban areas, and to have 10 different visitor types and to represent something to 10 different visitor types is really remarkable. You've got diverse destination assets. Even among your natural assets, they're very diverse. We've got fishing, hunting, biking, water sports, motorsports, a lot of different things, a lot of different audiences that you're trying to reach out to. You got a shortage of destination marketing assets, and this is not news to most of you in the room, but you're relatively underfunded, even particularly compared to your competition, and even compared to some of the other counties on this list. You've got great scenic assets, you've got great water, great trails, great roads, but so do a lot of other counties in western North Carolina and East Tennessee and North Georgia. In some ways, you've got individual assets that are better known, particularly to specific niche audiences. We were talking earlier about Solly. Solly is, not necessarily, Solly is an asset that people in Graham County take advantage of that is well known around the world as being a great mountain biking area. Tail of the Dragon, obviously, if you're a motorsports enthusiast, has tremendous recognition as being one of the great places to go drive a sports car or ride a motorbike. Fontana, very well known as an asset, either the dam, the lake, or the village. Joyce Kilmer, and then the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. All of these assets are probably much better known, and we were talking earlier about how Tabitha was saying, you know, she goes to a travel show and says that she's from Graham County, or says she's representing Robbinsville and Stokola and Santilla and Fontana. People don't necessarily always know that, but they know about things like Tail of the Dragon. And if you say, I'm from Graham County, where's that? Oh, it's where Tail of the Dragon is. I think this is not necessarily unique to a lot of destinations. There are a lot of destinations where you know the destination asset better than you know the county or the city. But it does make our job a little bit more challenging to form these into a destination that people do know. And then one other asset, you do have events, but there's not necessarily a signature event for the entire county that people associate with the area. I was thinking about this earlier. There's not a woolly worm festival here. There's not a ramp festival like there is in Haywood County. There's not an apple festival like there is in Hendersonville. So I want to be clear about events. I'm not suggesting that there needs to be an event every weekend at all. But I do think that it helps add some dimensions to the identity of the county. Having, not to say that things like Heritage Festival and some of the events that are done up on the Tail of the Dragon aren't important, but a lot of counties have heritage festivals. A lot of counties have events that are called by the same name. Stokola's got a fall festival, I believe, harvest festival. A lot of places have harvest festivals. It doesn't diminish the value of those events whatsoever, but in terms of being known for having a signature event, it certainly would help a great deal. Third thing is insufficient resources for destination marketing and tourism development. And I want to be clear about that. You do have small destination marketing budgets. You've got few businesses that are able to invest significant dollars in marketing. Now, again, there are businesses who are certainly catering to a specific niche audience, or they're certainly doing a good job of marketing themselves, but they're not necessarily creating awareness for the county as a whole. There's also limited ability for public infrastructure investment. In other words, if you come up with a great idea for a capital project within the county, there's limited ability to get dollars to help pay for that. You will need generally outside dollars, you would need outside partners, grant resources, and so forth. So this is certainly a challenge for us going forward. We're going to talk about some ways of overcoming this shortly. Fourth, and this is one thing that we heard a lot about throughout this process, is that, for lack of a better term, there's no cohesive destination experience. And what do I mean by that? Well, it's basically the feeling that everything around the visitor experience is thought through. That when you come here and you're a guest, that you are being catered to at every turn. And that's represented in hospitality and guest service delivery. And I've heard a lot about that in terms of inconsistency of that. It's certainly represented in signage and wayfinding consistency. Now, certainly a lot of us carry around cell phones now, which make wayfinding less important. But it becomes really important, though, in a county like this, where not everyone has cell phone signal wherever you go. And more importantly, I think having consistent wayfinding and signage sends a signal to guests that you're welcoming them, that you recognize their needs. Even though they're probably having GPS in their car and they have a cell phone with them, a smartphone with them, it represents that we recognize that you have specific and individual needs. Certainly heard a lot about cell phone and high-speed internet access. And to a certain extent, that falls into one of those areas that we can't necessarily control. We're at the mercy of other entities. We're at the mercy of carriers. We need more dollars to help make that more of a widespread possibility. But what we can do is provide connectivity to the guest, to the visitor of experiences. And that falls under itineraries. It falls under directing people to where they can get an alcoholic beverage when they're in the county. It falls under directing people to the best places to go trout fishing or hiking. And really, in a way, either physically or metaphorically, if you will, holding their hands, showing them how to visit Graham County. This has tremendous assets, but a lot of the assets are well hidden. Rick knows where the best places are to go to go trout fishing, and he may not want to share those secrets with everybody. But we can't make it guesswork for people once they either get here or, more importantly, during their trip planning phase. And then finally, the need for a coordinated destination marketing effort. This is an unusual county in a way because there are 4 tourism development authorities in a community that has between 8,000 and 9,000 people. That's pretty unusual. Now there are some examples across North Carolina, and I'm not questioning why there were 4 TDAs set up. I'm not even arguing necessarily that we need to unwind and go to Raleigh, because it's a difficult political environment in Raleigh right now, and probably will be for a while. And I'm not saying unwinding that, but what we do need is some formal coordinated marketing planning among the TDAs and among other tourism entities, where everyone's sitting at the table, identifying the assets that they have, and really coming up with a formal plan. This is going to help make the resources that you do have go much farther if there's some planning. And that's not taking place right now, and that's a real opportunity. Again, I'm not going to question necessarily why there's 4 different TDAs in the county. I understand the reasons why, but it does make it very challenging to present a cohesive and united effort in terms of marketing this as a destination.
What are the 4 authorities?
There's Graham County, Robbinsville, Fontana Dam, and Satilla.
Lake St. Helens putting in theirs this legislative
Then if you
session.
add the tribe, then that's a 5th.
No, but that's 5th.
Well, and then you've
yeah.
got great tourism thing also. It's not TDA,
We're
but
not
it's
a
another,
TDA.
well, it's not
It's
TDA, but it's a whole
partner.
other tourism
Yeah,
partner.
that's the thing, a coordinated
Mhm.
effort, it has to start happening.
There are also 5 opportunities as you look at the landscape here. Probably one of the most important things that you, as what I call an emerging destination, needs to pay attention to is the rise of the millennials. And those are the people that were born between 1979 and 1999. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that the baby boomers are going to be less of a factor in the next few years, but some of them are beginning to get up in years, and they're beginning to think, okay, how do I need to spend my time? How do I spend my money? What are my physical limitations? What are the things that I can physically do as a baby boomer? And I'm not picking on people in this room. Yeah, I'm not picking on Rick. But here's the other thing too, a lot of what you have to offer is activity, it's active pursuits. And I expect that people will be hiking and out on the lake and trout fishing until they're 100, okay? Baby boomers are the most active generation the world's ever produced. But they are getting up there in years. And there is data now that shows that the millennial generation is beginning to outspend and out-travel baby boomers. And so, this is one of my favorite charts I always like to show in talking about this, because 20 to 25 years ago, everybody was talking about baby boomers. And we have profited considerably as destinations and as an industry from baby boomers. Each one of these bars shows a percentage of the population in the United States for men and for women, and what percentage they are of the population. So you can see that the highest percentage of any group is right here in the mid to late 50s, okay? It's roughly probably about 55 years of age. But you can see right here, this big bump right here, roughly between 70 years of age and 45 years of age right here. We've got this bump of people. That's the baby boom generation. Here's what we call the baby bust generation, which is Gen X. Nobody ever talks about Gen X because, quite frankly, there's not as many of them. And then here come the millennials. And many people think, oh, the millennials, they're all living in their parents' basement. They don't have kids. They don't have money. It's not true anymore. I mean, when you think about someone born in 1979, they're now 35 years of age. They're getting up there in years. they're having kids, they're having careers, they're beginning to spend money. Differences are different than the boomers. There are some similarities, but there are some differences. And so I'm not a hockey player, but one of the terms I love from hockey is to skate to where the puck's going to be, not where it's at now. And for a destination like this, that's emerging, that's beginning to think, what do we want to be as a destination? We need to think about what do we want to present to millennial, to that target audience going forward. And that's going to be, they do have some very different behaviors and preferences. They are much more in tune with the outdoor environment. I think that's potentially a huge plus for Graham County. They like authentic experiences. I worry a lot about Myrtle Beach and about Pigeon Forge and how they're going to do with millennial environment. Now, many of those places will still do well, but I think there's great potential for this generation to be attracted to places like Graham County. It's going to have substantial impact on destination marketing, on spending patterns, on what their preferences are, and certainly destination development. This is a key thing right here. Yeah, let me just say one other thing real quick. This is a real key thing right here too. One thing we're noticing about millennials is they don't like to spend as much time in the car as we as baby boomers. They grew up growing up and being shuttled around to soccer practice and to school and the job and stuck in traffic more often than any other generation. They're not as crazy about it. They like walkable destinations. And I think that works really well with ideas for reimagining Robbinsville. They like walkable destinations. They like activity as opposed to staying in their car and having to drive everywhere.
This is a 10-year plan, right?
Yes.
A lot of the baby boomers are going to be in the next world by the end of the plan. So are you going to report out your strategies segmented between maximizing the remaining baby boomers versus maximizing the millennials?
Yes. Maximizing the remaining baby boomers sounds a little cryptic, perhaps, but yes. I know exactly what you mean. And you'll see very shortly here, I'm actually talking about having 5-year strategies and 10-year strategies. So that will definitely reflect. And you're right, 10 years, we're definitely talking about bumping up against the decline of baby boomers as being a significant force. There'll still be plenty of them around, but by that point, 10 years from now, the millennials will definitely be in control. I think another big opportunity is that this is really one of the truly last undiscovered places in the Southern Appalachians. I was telling somebody earlier, I moved here to North Carolina 20 years ago this week. And I have seen a lot of changes in Western North Carolina during that period of time. I've unfortunately seen some really good things, and I've seen some things not so good in terms of taking care of our natural environment. And we've made some mistakes during that period of time, some of which started a long time ago, well before 20 years ago. When you look at Sugar Mountain up in Avery County and the development, Sugar Top that was built up there, which led to changes in the ridgeline laws. This is one of the last places that's truly undiscovered, and we need to figure out how to make that into a positive. It's a highly marketable position, but you do have to tell people about it. You do have to a certain degree, want to be discovered. I do think that those unspoiled assets that you have can motivate both visitor and business activity. There are going to be business people, small businesses who want, particularly among the millennial generation, who want to come to a place that's unspoiled, who like the idea of coming to a place where they can go and hike or boat very easily. In the very first public workshop that we did way back in November, probably the very first challenge I heard about during that public workshop was the percentage of land that's controlled by either the state or the federal government. And it was presented as a negative. And I understand that. I absolutely understand that. But we've got to find a way to turn that negative into a positive. Because believe it or not, outside of Graham County, that is a positive for a lot of people. The fact that you do have land and scenery that is so well cared for and so well preserved. This area, this region continues to surge in population. There are a huge number of people within a 200-mile radius of Robbinsville, within a 200-mile radius of Graham County, plus Florida. 22 million people, residents within a 200-mile radius. That doesn't include Florida, which has historic ties to western North Carolina. Many of those people know nothing about Graham County. We've got to do a better job of getting the word out to those folks and inviting them to come visit. But this is also a really significant competitive arena. You're not going to be the first people who decide to go and market yourself as a destination, as an unspoiled destination to people in Atlanta or Florida or Charlotte or Raleigh. There are a lot of other destinations that are fighting to get a hold of those same people. Atlanta is probably one of the most competitive destinations in the country for travel marketers right now, because you have all the beach destinations that are trying to get Florida. I'm trying to get Atlantans. You have people in Florida, cities in Florida trying to get people from Atlanta to travel. They have a hub there so they can go anywhere in the world on Delta Airlines. So we've got to really step up our game in terms of being competitive and inviting people to come visit here. You have extraordinary wealth of natural assets. Not news to you, but the question is how can we leverage that? I think one of the things that we've got to do is we've got to transform those assets into benefits for the visitor. What does that mean? What does the fact that you've got this tremendous unspoiled paradise here? You've got fantastic water quality. What's the real benefit to the visitor there? How does that translate to my vacation experience? I think also, too, we've got to overcome the negatives associated with natural assets, with being an undiscovered area, if you will, and figure out how we can leverage those into spending opportunities and motivators to visit. One of the things I talk about a lot with any destination is distinguishing between motivators and satisfiers. The fact that you have great scenery may be a motivator to some people, but it also may be a satisfier. It may just be lots of places in western North Carolina have great scenery. Lots of places can claim that. It's not something that you can necessarily own. So what can we own out of that? What can we own that's actually going to motivate somebody to visit? I also think that goes back a lot to what I heard a lot in the feedback, which is we need a single cohesive brand image, a single cohesive brand message that resonates with potential visitors, okay? And I think that you have to do that by identifying a single strand of meaning that has meaning and resonates with people who come here for motorsports, who come here to be on the lake, who are hikers, who are fishermen, who come here to appreciate the history and craft heritage. We've got to find that one single strand of meaning that runs through every visitor type. Because you've got, again, a lot of different visitor audiences that you're trying to cater to, that you're trying to target. And the last opportunity here is that there are more ways to connect with potential visitors, to connect with your market than ever before. All of you that have businesses probably are on the internet. No doubt about that. You probably have social media presence. But we also have a bewildering variety of ways to connect with people. And I think Graham County has got to embrace a multitude of media for reaching those different target audiences. If you told me that you had 10 different visitor types, that means that's a lot of different potential ways of engaging with visitors. Think about, I bet within this room, I bet everyone in this room has a different way that they engage with media every day. Some of you probably spend a lot of time on the internet. Some of you probably read a lot of magazines. Some of you may have hobby or specialty niches that you're mostly interested in. We've got to find a way to engage with the people who are likely to visit Graham County. I think one of the things that we've got to see an expansion of is to be able to test things. And I think public relations, social media, online marketing, all provide a lot of new ways for telling the Graham County story. Here's the challenge that you've got. You've got a very deep and broad destination. So how do I communicate that depth and breadth of that story to as many people as possible? You can't do it through print advertising. And you just don't have the resources to do that anymore through print. So we've got to find other ways to be able to tell our story. And going back to something I said earlier, it's going to require a coordinated and very formalized effort. Okay? You're not going to have one TDA, you're going to have 4 TDAs. You've got other entities that are interested in tourism as a form of economic development and growing business. So we've got to find a way, we've got to have a formalized effort and grow some partnerships within the county. Get people talking to one another. So some next steps. I want to get your feedback, certainly, but also, coming back the next time, we're looking at, I'll repeat this later on, we're looking at April 23rd. Come back next time to represent some specific tactical initiatives, some specific action steps for each of those challenges and opportunities. Suggest objectives that have both a 5 and 10-year schedule, okay? In part because of what Roger was talking about with the differences between baby boomers and millennial, but also in part because there are things you should be able to do within the next 5 years. There are also some things that are going to take longer than 5 years to implement. Just recognize that that's probably, given some of the limitations on resources, that's probably the case. We have to determine the metric for measuring impact, and I'll certainly present some ideas. We saw some examples of some of those metrics earlier, but I think there's some other ways of measuring that impact as well. And then finally, implementation strategies. I want us to, at the end of this plan, to walk out understanding who's responsible for what. How are we going to continue this effort? And you know, I think we're fortunate that GREAT is the sponsor of this plan development because in a way, being an entity that has certainly a lot of the interest of Graham County as part of its mission, can continue to oversee the implementation of this plan going forward. There are a number of things that I'm going to suggest that I want everyone to provide some feedback on. We need to talk about, is it possible to raise the occupancy tax so that so that we have a higher occupancy tax in the county? Is it possible that we should be looking at other ways of funding tourism development in the county? Are there things that we can do to grow food and beverage and retail and grow small business? And I've got a long list of tactics and initiatives that we'll discuss, and I will want to get your feedback next time we meet. But this needs to be an action-oriented plan. It needs to be something that really results in measurable impact and goes back, as we go back to those first 5 objectives. Grow visitation here, both overnight and day trip, grow the tax base, get more people employed, grow revenues for businesses, and continue to protect the natural environment that you've got here. That's the other key part of this. That's the one thing I haven't said that I have sort of taken for granted, is that we want to continue to protect all the great assets that you have here that are very important to an awful lot of people. Any feedback or questions?
Feedback, I guess. The thing you talk about the 4 or 5 county tourism authorities. Well, it don't matter how many you got, because I mean Bryson had what, 2 or 3, I forget exactly. I mean they have a common portal, Great Smoky's website. So you can have as many of those as you want. You need a common portal to put your funds towards.
And that's a good example. I was, you know, there's a couple of examples that I've worked with recently that have done just that. Boone and Watauga County,
Yeah.
2 different TDAs, but they have a united marketing effort. Salisbury and Rowan County, 2 different TDAs, united marketing effort, present themselves as one destination. And it doesn't mean you eliminate TDAs. All of those entities still have tourism development authorities, and I think that's a really important point. So there are options for doing this in a way that gets better use out of the resources that you do have. Absolutely.
And then, like, when you talk about the overall plan, like your millennials and your baby boomers, I'm a Generation X. And,
Yeah, we learned that the other
We
day.
did that.
Somebody had to tell us, we're like, what are we anyway?
and the thing about the millennials is that one of the biggest shift is they go and they eat out more. They don't eat in as much. All right, so when it comes into the food industry in Graham County, if you want to bring in restaurants and stuff like that, one of the biggest draws is the alcohol.
Yep.
And that's the big thing is with your marketing. Are you going to have alcohol? You're not going to have alcohol. It don't matter which way you look at it, you just got to pick a way in a direction. So you can go food without alcohol. You just need a way to attack your millennials and your baby boomers. So what do they have in common? Health.
Right.
Good food. You know, so you can have good food without alcohol. One of the biggest events that I saw, I didn't have nothing to do with it, was juicers. People come in and eat healthy food, they don't even know meat. Well, they made like a Woodstock, but they called it a juice stock or something like that. They turned it into a multi-million-dollar event, and it goes all over the world, big exotic destinations. No alcohol there. And they turned it into, and the people that came in there were like the millennials and the boomers and all that, but they were healthy. So you could tie that in with your extreme sports, your mountain biking and your hiking and all that.
You're absolutely right. I mean, one of the reasons that we see so many cooking shows on TV is because baby boomers and millennials both really have embraced food and beverage as something that's important to their lifestyle, whether they're cooking it, whether they're going out to eat, or they just like watching it on TV. And I think it used to be, when I started out in this industry, that the common saying is that food and beverage is not a driver of destination choice. Well, that's not true anymore. People do make decisions based on food and beverage.
Haywood County's whole marketing plan right now, to my understanding, is agritourism, what is it? Farm to
Farm to
table.
table, yeah.
That's, their whole campaign really revolves around that, from their logo and website and everything right now.
That's right, and that didn't used to be the case. It used to be that food was sort of a secondary thing, and now food is incredibly important to the destination experience. Here's the decision that the county's got to make, I think, that you as stakeholders, you as residents need to make. And that is, if we're going to decide that we're not going to push for alcoholic beverage, for legalizing alcoholic beverages, and not say that there aren't places you can get. That's the other thing we've got to do. For those people who want that choice, we've got to be able to direct them to the places that do serve alcoholic beverages. There's three things I want to say about it. First, I don't think it's necessarily just alcoholic, or the lack thereof of alcoholic beverages is discouraging many people from visiting. I think maybe the lack of restaurants that are not here because of no alcoholic beverages may be discouraging people from visiting. Second thing is, if you decide as a county that you're not going to go in that direction, you still need to find ways of growing tourism spending. Okay? You'll need to work that much harder to find ways to grow spending, to grow tax base, and so forth. And I'm not, by the way, I'm not here to say that the alcoholic beverages are, the panacea is going to solve all of Graham County's problems. Not at all. And I know that there's been lots of discussion about that in the county. The third thing I want to say, though, is that I think everyone needs to make a conscious decision that if we go down the path of not having alcoholic beverages, here are the things we know we're not going to have. So let's make the decision. We're going to live with it, and here's the other direction we're going to go. We're going to present ourselves as having this, this, and this, and here's our strategies for doing so. Roger.
Can you turn around that last statement a little bit? Instead of saying, if we're not going to go down the path of alcoholic beverages, we're not going to have this, why can't that become a positive? And personally, I don't think the study should recommend alcohol or not alcohol.
Right.
Because then it'll be a rough road to hoe at the political level and so on and so forth.
I don't think this plan doesn't include that. I mean,
Well,
it includes the fact that we've discussed it and talked about it.
But I think there is a way to deal with the issue that should not be controversial. And that is reversing what you just said and saying that if we have alcohol, the revenue streams will be this, or the new business generation capacity will be that. And if we don't, it's just another line in the graph. And then everybody can make a decision on this study whether they want to fill in that hole in the graph, which means most likely a referendum, and whatever that is. But that shouldn't cloud this study. It should just be very factual.
And I've said all along, I'm not going to be put in the position of either recommending for or against alcoholic beverages. That's beyond my scope, and it's not my decision to make. But you can certainly make the case that if you were to go in this direction of having alcoholic beverages, this would be the impact. If you make the case vice versa to that as well.
Do you have the analytical capacity with all the different sources you have to put a dollar value across 5 or 6 criteria based on whether we have alcohol or we don't?
The easiest way to do it would be strictly to look at what's happened in other counties, to use real world evidence. That's the best. If I'm going to look, I'm going to look and see what happened in a place like Silva, for instance, which is probably one of the more recent places that has had alcoholic beverages.
Well, you've used Bryson City, and we spent an hour talking about Bryson City and what it had and what it didn't have. We know what happens as a result of a casino, and nobody's talking about another casino, but,
Yeah.
but we also know what's happened or happening in Murphy. And I just hope that everybody takes a deep breath and realizes that we are a democracy and that people have the right to vote on stuff and have that right based on factual information. And it seems to me that this study is the best way to deliver that factual information.
I think what Roger's really just pointing out is that it can be an economic driver. And if we're talking about economics of an area, it has to be talked about economically.
Well, and specific with regards to, I think, travel and tourism, I mean, that's the other part of this. Not to say that there aren't other benefits and costs associated with it, but specifically looking at travel and tourism.
My background's all food and beverage, and you will not get restaurants without alcohol.
Not 7 days a week for sure.
It's not, you just can't make money if you don't have alcohol. We've had Applebee's, Red Lobster, a number of big chains call the county and the town. And as soon as they find out it's a dry county, they hang up. It's just not gonna happen. It's not real work. Is it a tough fight to have in this county? Yeah. But if you're gonna make plans, assuming that there's alcohol, that you're gonna have restaurant growth, unless you've got a big push for alcohol, the restaurants aren't gonna happen.
They won't come without.
No.
We can't make it.
Can't survive.
But are you all okay that the study doesn't say alcohol or not alcohol, it just gives the facts about what the difference
I
would
think
be?
that's perfect.
Yeah.
I think that's absolutely perfect.
Tell what you'd have to do in order to make up the deficit.
Well, I don't think that's where this study is really going to involve a lot of this marketing, cohesiveness, getting together identity, and I think, just like any other plan that Graham County has had, in a year or two, it's going to have the capability of going back in and morphing it. There's a whole lot of low-hanging fruit that we need to deal with right now. And there are people in our county that are dealing with the alcoholic issue and trying to look into it. So I think right now with this plan, it really needs to stay on track with just so much of the foundational things that we need to get in place in order to go forward. And then when we get maybe at the end of this year and look back, we can probably start tackling some of those bigger issues of zoning and alcohol and a number of different things that we have challenges with here
I
in the
love
county.
you dearly, but I have to differ.
I
with
know.
you.
There's just so much in this plan to get accomplished that we don't have, and you can't do that without some of this stuff first.
One of the first slides that was up there went to what are the opportunities and what are the threats and what are the...
To make us competitive
to
with
make us
another
competitive.
destination.
And with respect for everybody's different views on this, at the end of the day, I think people who are in the business or economic developers or tourism professionals know that one of the threats to our ability to achieve the goals of this study is the difficulty for restaurants to survive.
Right.
And the evidence is so clear over the past 10 years of how many restaurants have started and died. And
No, and I do. I know of a group that is thinking about doing some work on this privately. And that's going to be the direction that that really has to.
Well, I think the other thing is that the idea behind this tourism plan is to provide an identity as a destination. I mean, you're talking about the funnel that he had the picture up there. You know, we're at the very top. We haven't funneled down what all that's going to look like yet. So I think that the other part of that is that it's up to the citizens of this county to get together and get the votes that they need for alcohol. It's, you know, we can, it's been mentioned in Reimagining Robbinsville. It comes up all the time at travel and tourism meetings and then in these workshops as well. And but I think the bigger picture of what we're trying to do now is to figure out who we are, how do we market to these 22 million people in 200-mile radius, and those things are going to come later, as Tabitha said. I think it's definitely...
Well, in every destination other than our own, it's
a
been
point
from
of
a private
discussion.
citizens versus a group like
Versus a group,
Great
right.
or
Can
even
you
travel and
be a
tourism.
little plainer than what you just were? And, because I like plain speaking, are you saying that the leadership of this study does not want to include in the study some type of comparative analysis with and without alcohol?
I'm not saying that this group that's, you mean GREAT?
Or great, or whoever?
Well, GREAT is, you know, the grantor, and then we have matching funds from each town in travel and tourism. That wasn't the purpose of this
I don't think the
tourism
purpose
plan.
of this process is to determine whether or not Green County has alcohol or not.
Absolutely not.
But, yeah, and I understand what you're saying, Roger. You know, it seems like a lot of the discussion in a variety of different meetings comes down to this issue. And what I'd really like to see personally is that the people that keep talking about alcohol and the need for it, there's a political process to work through to make that come to
Fruition.
a vote.
Yeah.
So why is that not happening if that's what the proponents of alcohol want? So that's beyond this process. I don't see that as part of this process at all.
I just, go ahead, Lucy.
I'm really new into these things, and I know I haven't been here, but I have spoken to a number of people who have been in these meetings. But and I can agree with both sides. You know, I see your point, Rick, but at the same time, to have a tourism plan that is for the county, for the towns, everything, it's a 10-year plan, to not even mention it, to not do as Roger is saying, you know,
it's
what
going to
Roger,
be in there, it's mentioned.
what Roger's saying, I just feel like that's kind of folly, because
I mean,
you never
it's
know
kinda
what's
like
going to
the-
happen in the next 10
The
years.
Reimagining Robbinsville, it's mentioned in there along with zoning. It's the three basic issues that come up is
Time
corridor
and time
K,
again.
zoning, and alcohol.
You know,
And they come up in most plans that we've worked on because they are issues that our county is
what
facing.
gets people's attention is their pocketbook. And unless the study deals with the delta in revenues with and without as a spot-on issue, you're not going to get people interested in this matter. And I'm not saying the study, the last thing I want is for this study to recommend alcohol and not recommend alcohol. That would be a terrible mistake. But to give everybody the factual data with a professional consultant and a team of citizens, probably 100 people all in who've come to meetings and so forth, and say, this is with, this is without, would be very informative to the debate that, as you say, Rick, people who want to do this need to get organized and do it. And then, you know, so I just hope that out of the study comes some kind of section that, and by the way, it doesn't have to be with or without alcohol only. It could be with or without some other things too, because there's a lot of different elements of this.
Yeah, and I you know, the last thing I want is consultants to turn this into turn the study into a debate about, or have it be a centerpiece of the study. There are lots of other challenges. I didn't address zoning in corridor K, by the way. But,
Good to know.
Well, can you tell us what our tourism economy would be with or without Corridor K?
no,
We could have some discussion around that.
I know that there have been lots of successful destinations that have grown up without having corridor K, so. But so I don't want to turn this in, I certainly don't want to turn this discussion into the centerpiece. I understand all the issues around it. I don't want to, I'm saying, I don't want to lose sight of some of these other really important issues that we've begun to talk about in this process.
Well, the point I was making is with restaurant growth and stuff like that, that's one of the key issues you're gonna have to do to cover. I mean, you can make a food scene without alcohol. You can make a food scene with alcohol. And if you're gonna go one way or the other, that's gonna approach how you build up your restaurant or your food industry. You know? I can tell from Bryson before alcohol and after alcohol, you can see the difference. You can go down and get out of your car and walk and be to all these other places, you know. So it did help their restaurant business. You know, I'm not saying that's right or wrong here. You know, like I say, I mean, you got a multi-million-dollar festival off of juicing that has nothing to do with alcohol. You know, so I mean, you can do it without alcohol.
We
But
can
you
have a
can't talk
Festival,
about that
remember
without
too, a festival
approaching
is
that.
just one time a year, though it doesn't last the whole year, and that's one thing that you do have to watch with festivals and events, and like Sturgis, you know, up in South Dakota,
Right.
bam, and you know,
Well, what
Daytona
was-
Bike Weekend,
Right.
bam.
There's a little
But-
beer that gets goes in
Yeah.
those
Well,
festivals.
what is the tax base for Graham County in 1 year?
See, that's like I said, this private citizens group, I think they're trying to generate and get together some of this data to take it out of what the conversation has been about so much is about religion and the Southern Bible Belt and make it more of an economic driver for a community. And so that I know of a group that is trying to get that information together,
Right.
to have it in a different discussion.
But we're gonna have to be event-based advertising. We don't have enough, like you said, for print. We don't have enough to
Right.
do it as a destination yet. So it's gonna have to be event-based advertising what we do, so
Oh,
we're gonna
yeah.
have to focus on events.
Well, and I think one point that we had talked about, and I realize this is a, kind of low-hanging fruit, 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10 year plan, but we have to, in some ways right now, deal with what we have or what we don't have. And so what are ways that we can make those perceived negatives, if that's the way you perceive it, into a positive or,
Make the positives even a more positive.
Right, and I think we lose sight of that a little bit sometimes. It's kind of like maybe we have no Doodles brewery here. I mean, I don't know
Right.
what that all looks like, but we don't have it right now. And, if that's something in the future, I do think it's, the citizens are the ones that are gonna have to vote on that and go through that political process that Rick is talking about. And that's not something, it's kind of like that one, you had the section of things that we are out of our control. I mean, we as citizens have control over that political process and to choose whether or not to go through it or gather the data, like what you're saying. I think it's the citizens' responsibility to know that, whether they're for or against alcohol. But I think that's in that category of, that's something we don't have the capability to change right now, just like we don't have the capability to, ride four-wheelers on all four service land either. So I think, just keeping it in perspective about where we are right now, yes, that's, maybe where we'd like to be in 10 years. But we have to be realistic in our understanding of that.
So certainly the lowest hanging fruit that you have is the marketing changes that you can make, either in terms of tactics and messaging or in terms of some of the things that maybe not as low hanging fruit, but some of the things you do on a countywide basis to try to present a more cohesive single destination message.
Could you put a little more meat and potatoes on the next steps?
Yeah, so what I'm gonna come back to on this next meeting, again, we saw a public work, we'll go over a couple things. We saw one more public workshop. After that, want to come back and present a informal, or present a draft of a strategic plan based on all the feedback that I've heard after that meeting, and get your feedback on that plan. But next time we come around, what I want to do is for each one of those challenges and opportunities to present some specific tactical action items, okay? Here are the things that I think will result in the greatest impact for the county going forward. And then to put all of those in terms of how we want to achieve them on potentially even a 1-year cycle, a 1-year attainment, 5-year and 10-year schedule. And then what are the metrics around it? How are we going to measure the impact? So I'm going to come back next time with my suggestions. I've got pages of potential tactics and action items to go forward with. I just didn't want to do all of that tonight. I want to do, as I said, a recap of all the input that we've gotten so far and try to focus in on these key areas of opportunity and challenge and how we're going to address those.
So your timeline is that another couple months we come back and we meet and give
Yeah,
us.
so we're going to, our next meeting is April 23rd.
That's 6 of 6 meetings, that's the last one.
Yeah, that's the last public workshop. And then after that, a month after that, we'll come back and present a draft of the plan, get everyone's feedback on that in terms of what we want to include on that. We'll talk about the measurables and you know, are they too aggressive, are they not aggressive enough? And we'll look at the different metrics for how we're going to measure that. And then lastly, it'll be an implementation strategy. Who's going to oversee and be responsible for the implementation of this going forward, and which parties are responsible for it?
Right, let me mention one about the timeline.
Yeah.
I think, Roger, to answer your question, we will have the timeline there. The final presentation, the draft will be sometime in May, possibly at the great May meeting. And then this project itself, the final report is due mid-June. So we're working on a pretty fast time.
Are we going to seek all the different tourism boards and city and county commissions and everybody to accept the plan, or where does it go after Great is happy with it?
That's the goal, we're trying to get
That's one
everybody
of
to
the
adopt
things
it.
we need to discuss, is what are the next steps? And, you know, I think Great as a nonprofit organization and involved in the different sectors of the county and the tourism committee, I think we're in a pretty unique position where that we can kind of work together to draw all the groups, especially the DDAs, in and come up with a coordinated approach that we want to do in the future. This is the first phase, really, is this, and then we have a little bit of money
We have
for a
very
phase
little
2
bit
for some implementation of some of those things that we can choose to make a real high impact, real fast from this plan. So, and then the future, you know, the door is open there as far as potential grant funding, support from the county, the towns, to move forward with different ideas. So I like the idea of maybe, you know, those objectives in a 1 to 5 year span, and those that's in a 6 to 10 year span that we can begin working on. But I know that the organization and the board of directors and the mission of Great is to be an organization where the different groups in the county can come together and have input and voice and come up with a coordinated approach. Because we all know it's better to work together than this one going that way and this one going that way, and we don't know what's taking place. So if we can do that, then I think we're definitely making progress.
I think the other thing is that once we have this plan, like with any plan, then you can start to seek grant funding and other private funding, because you have something concrete to say, you know, okay, we'd like you to help on the wayfinding, or, you know, it's like the reimagining Robbinsville. We've just been able to start with the Greenway and start with different segments because, you know, there's different committees through Great that work on different things. And really all of those things eventually influence tourism. I mean, every committee that Great has influences the tourism. And so I think there's even opportunities for tourism in places we are not really thinking of, but we'll have a plan to present to potential funders where we didn't have that before. So I think there's a real opportunity to get some good funding. out
Because
of this.
we are partnering, it is a nonprofit and government entity, so there's some things that I am eligible for as far as funding goes, and there's some
Same
things the
with the
nonprofit.
towns.
And so money attracts money, and if you have more successes, that also leads to more people looking in and being, if you get more stories written about yourself, a lot of good feelings about Graham County, it's very attractive, it's like sticky money, and it just keeps attracting more, so that coordinated effort is really gonna be important going forward.
It's kind of like, you know, when we requested matching funds for the grant, that each entity has some skin in the game, it's important. And the same thing as coming to that table that Chris was talking about. Because if we do not do that, then we know kind of the result of that.
Now, I got one question. Now, is Great going to be like the coordinator, or are they going to be the implementer of whatever everybody comes in agreement with?
I'm not sure that, and I see as far as implementation will be a coordinated effort. Great can certainly serve as the organization that provides that impetus into some of the implementation strategies. You know, we'd be certainly willing to do that in ways that we can. But everybody's got to come to the table. And my role as the director of Great is trying to get folks in the county and the different entities working together to accomplish a goal out here that we all can see. So, yeah.
So I have a question. If you do the final draft at the great meeting and you present it there, are you going to allow me to tape it there so I can put it out to the rest of the county so
That's
that
a
they can know?
question you and I can discuss later on.
I'd like for you to tell in public.
Well, you know the feelings on that, so we'll discuss.
So
that.
you would only like for it to be shown to the people who attend your great
It's
meeting?
possible. Come and talk to me. We'll see what the advantages would be. So.
That's an open
Okay.
door for a conversation.
Any other questions or comments?
This is the first meeting I've come to, and everything I saw that was really good. We talk about it, I do social media and websites. We talk about return on investment, you're talking about the impact. Now, could you give me a little bit of how you're going to be measuring?
Well, let's talk about that, because I think that there's, if we go back to the original objectives and we look at also some of the metrics, I think there are a number of what I would say macro metrics, which are everything from tourism employment and wages associated with tourism, and tax revenue and some of the other metrics that we saw that the state reports back or that are available in local places. But I also think that there are some what I would call micro or marketing, and you're certainly going to be familiar with some of those, increasing the amount of website traffic, for instance, as being a metric. Any number of other smaller metrics that may be focused on just observational, how much more traffic are we getting, how many new small businesses in our town or in the county and so forth.
And of course, I mean, the town hall is just, did the occupancy tax go up too? Did the sales, local, state
another good-
sales
another
taxes
good
go
metric.
up as well? And I'm sure Becky would be able to help us in some of those areas as well. So
Yeah, some of which are fairly easy and low-hanging fruit, to use that term, in terms of being able to track, some of which are going to require a little bit more effort and a little bit more dedicated. How many more retail stores are there in the county? Just any number of other things that may require a little bit more effort to track. Well, I'd like for everything to be hopefully as objective as possible rather than subjective in terms of measurement.
Chris, I'd like to mention, this came out of the visitor profile study, and it also came out of the opt-in process for the visioning for the 7 westernmost counties. Can we have a measurement around like seasonal visitation, second homes, or, I mean, I think that's a big segment of our tourism, especially in the summertime.
Oh, you mean in terms of measuring season?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure.
how do you measure?
Yeah, exactly.
If there is a methodology out there that we might be able to incorporate for Graham County especially.
There's, it's interesting. I'll do some checking, but there are some other highly seasonal destinations that have developed some metrics around that, and it may be everything from utility usage to a number of other, and I'll do some research on that, because I know some other destinations that are highly seasonal. By the way, you'll note, I didn't address seasonality in the plan. To be honest, I think that your challenges are such that you have many of the things that you need to be
Before
working
that.
on before we even cross that bridge, to be honest. I think that's,
Hey,
as
you know
much as
what,
I.
that's a new thought. Maybe that's the reason why our utility bills are so high in the wintertime, because there's less people to pay them. 200
Let's get
versus
that
400.
strategy to
Yeah.
Duke Energy.
Yeah.
And I guess the thing I've been thinking of is we also have to sell to the local people how important tourism is. How much it makes.
The internal marketing.
We have to market to us as well as the 22 million.
Well,
So we need some strategies to do that.
yeah, and one of the tactical things that I have included on the broad list of tactical items is how do we get more local people involved in tourism? Even if they don't necessarily, either directly involved, or how do we get everyone understanding, but also how do we get more ambassadors for tourism locally? And I think that's a huge opportunity for a county like Graham, when you've got people like Rick who know where the best places are to trout fish, for instance. And we've got other people who are experts, locals. Everybody who's a local should be an expert on the area. That's part of not only hospitality training, but I think that's good marketing as well. So how do we recruit more experts on this area and get them involved, get everyone to be a stakeholder in that? I know you're not going to share those places you like to go to.
Oh, yeah, I'll take you along with me.
You'll have the blindfold experience.
But that's actually
Hey, talk about product development right there, Beth.
that's been a successful tactic that a lot of destinations have used.
Blindfolded.
No, please. Is to, how do we get more local ambassadors, is to, we'll find a way to make you stars, make them stars of, the local market. And there's so many more ways of doing that, whether it's social media, video, any number of online, to turn locals into experts and ambassadors now than they used to be. You can do that on a much more extensive basis.
Well, I want to say, I think you've done a fantastic job over
Yes,
5
it's
years.
the
Where it is.
Well, this is a remarkable destination, and it really is a terrific community. And, on the one hand, I love the fact that it's undiscovered. On the other hand, as a
Right.
tourism marketer, it pains me, because I leave here and I'm immediately, every time I come here, I discover someplace new or some new view. I think about that drive, for instance, from the turnoff on 28 and going from there to Fontana. It's like driving through a national park. I mean, it's just extraordinary. Now, again, I've got to turn that into a benefit. We've got to find a way to turn that into a benefit that means something to people, and actually means something to people who live here locally too. I want that to be generate revenue and make jobs. So
You need to drive from here.
that too, yeah.
Yeah.
That
Take
too.
a look at it.
Yeah.
We need to get you an itinerary.
Well, maybe the next time he comes out, maybe we can take a driving tour.
Yeah.
I think as a small business owner in a different county, I think that you need, I've never really thought of this before until it was just brought up. It's amazing to me how much hatred, for lack of looking for a better word, how much hatred there is because I'm a small business owner that moved here to take advantage of the beauty in the area and mountain biking and the fishing and everything else. It's amazing how much hatred that I feel, that I see. People come in my door and tell me to this and that. They're local folks, and they don't like the tourists, and they don't want tourists here. And the town would be so much better if we didn't have these stupid tourists. It's amazing. I see it every day. No lie. I see it every stinking day because I have a parking lot in front of my shop. I have to put out 2 signs that say bike shop parking only, even though truly in my lease I own 9 of those spaces out there. The locals, in a large part, just hate that I'm a tourist-based business. You guys have to figure out a way to overcome that.
Yeah.
Please figure that out. It will go so far for making your small business owners happy because it's wicked bad. I had it happen today, and I was so mad for about an hour. I was fuming because this guy decided to park in my space. I know exactly who he is. There's nothing that I can do about it because he's a local. Work on that as a community. If you figure out how to do it, tell me how to do it so that I can do it too. But
Hey,
it is amazing. Yeah, no shit, right? That would be it. I thought about investing in the up and down and putting that guy out there. Yeah.
Well, as I heard recently, the mayor of Charleston, West Virginia, a city that has, a city and a state that have really struggled, okay? Only state of the last 50 states that have lost of the last 50 years that have lost population. And of course, Charleston's had a lot of challenges over the last few years. He said, tourism is not debatable, okay? It's going to happen. It is a meaningful form of economic development. It's not the only form of economic development. It's not a lifesaver. It's not debatable. And it's the most competitive business that you can be.
I think the other thing is, through these processes, we have, and over time, and Teresa, I know, because over the last 10 years working with you, invited the locals to have a say, because that's really kind of what was happening before, is there's been no say. And I think it's just as important to listen to those people that don't want tourism as it is the people that do. But I also think they have to participate. We've had these public workshops, and so back to your point, it is happening. It's going to happen. If they could help us understand some of the nuances around their reasoning behind not wanting it, or wanting it, on a different level, or, so that we've had these, and so we have invited the public, and that's all I can say to you. I'm sorry that you have to go through that, but I've experienced that same thing, and there are folks that don't want that, and I would encourage them to attend.
Tourism is happening in Charleston and everywhere else, but it is critical. To me, after being here 20 years worth doing economic development things, it is critical here, especially even more so than it was 20 years ago. Now,
But some of that is, I think, part of that recipe is fear of change, and fear of where I live and what's going to happen if this change comes. And that internal marketing
Are they
campaign,
gonna spoil
get
it
out,
for us?
right, get out there that if you don't participate, some of these things that you're fearing, that you're stating is your
Are
fear,
gonna be
can
happening,
happen if
and
you
they can
don't
happen
give
in a
your
way that
input.
you're not at all comfortable with.
Yeah. Because all of us here, we live here for a reason. I don't live in a big city, then I don't want to have anything to do with like big cities, so it is important that we keep it the way it is. But still be able to stimulate some growth.
legally.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it is competitive. That's the thing. People got lots of choices. Thanks, everybody.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.